Okay, hi everyone. Hi. Thank you for staying in class and thank you for coming today to our Getting Together conference. So as you may know, as you can see here too, we are with Andrew Starling, representing SM Dayton. From is it SM Dayton?
Yes.
Yep. I thought I was missing one part, right? SM Dayton, and yeah, we appreciate that you time to be quiet because of the sound system of the room. We need to be very quiet so we can listen properly. And now we're going to introduce Andrew. He is a product developer and publishing manager for the University of Dayton Publishing. He has over 30 years ELT experience in different roles and is co-author of various ESL series. Andrew has a degree in teaching pedagogy and MA in digital education from the University of Leeds and teaching certifications from the University of Cambridge. He's currently an MBA candidate from Universidad Internacional de La Rioja. So please give a warm welcome to Andrew and we can start listening.
Can everybody hear me?
There. Yes. I think it's working out. Yeah.
Yep. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Put your hand up if you can hear me. Yeah, great. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that introduction. And good afternoon, almost good evening there in Chile. It's only about 4:30 in the afternoon here in Mexico, where I am. It's very, 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 very nice to be with you. I'm very, very honored to have been invited to talk for a little bit at this most excellent event. Just before everyone came into the room, Abigail was telling me how successful the event has been, and I'm very, very happy to be part of that. And obviously to support teachers and teaching in Chile. I was in Chile in October last year for the first time, visiting schools, talking with teachers like yourselves, and I had an absolutely wonderful time. And I hope to go back again very, very soon and hopefully perhaps even to make it to Concepcion, which I think is where everybody is now. Is that right? Yeah, fantastic. We have about 45 minutes. It's quite a big topic, so there's a lot to talk about. What we could perhaps do, I don't know if somebody is there by the computer, either to put questions in the chat as we go on, or we can perhaps save 5 or 10 minutes at the end for any questions. How does that sound?
Talita, can you answer at the end is better?
Yeah, I think so.
Can you say it aloud?
Oh, can you hear me now? Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the end is better.
At the
That
end,
will help?
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll put aside a few minutes then for questions and answers at the end. Okay, fantastic. So, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a vehicle for ELT. Now, some of you may or may not already be familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. If you are, great. Hopefully, what we'll talk about in the next 45 minutes will add to that, will build on that, and give you a few new ideas. And if it's your first time, it's your first contact with the Sustainable Development Goals, then fantastic. Then welcome to this very, very interesting topic. And basically, we're going to be doing this in 4 parts. We'll start by looking at the SDGs themselves. What are they? You know, why were they created? What are they for? And then we'll look at how the SDGs can relate to and link to the learning community, specifically, of course, English language teaching. We'll talk about some ideas as well for getting started in the classroom. And I've actually updated this particular session. So there is some brand new material that's never been seen before. You're the first people to see this material, and I'll mention it when I get to it. If for some reason you stop hearing me, then somebody just shout, and we'll see what we can do to fix the audio. But I think everybody can pretty much hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, onwards then. So what are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? Well, at a very, very high level, they are a call for action, basically, by pretty much all the countries around the world. And they are a call for action, basically, or they're a call for action from the countries to work together globally to provide a better and more sustainable future for everybody who lives on this planet. And the idea to the goals, to the objectives, is to tackle, at the moment, global problems, global issues that we all face, including things like poverty, climate change, inequality, environmental degradation, peace and justice. So they're a blueprint, a map, if you like, a roadmap to a brighter, a better, a more sustainable future. And the goals themselves were set up. The Goals Act, this sort of goes back all the way to the 90s originally, but we're not going to go into that much detail. For the sake of today, we're just going to say that the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs as they're called sometimes, were set up in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly. And the idea is that the goals are met, are achieved, are fulfilled by the year 2030, which is actually now less than 7 years away. So already 8 years have gone past, 7 years left for these goals to be achieved. And as I mentioned, the work on that led to the Sustainable Development Goals can be traced back to 1992, to the Earth Summit, when 178 countries decided to adopt something called Agenda 21. So goes back to the 90s, but the goals themselves were actually set up and officially established in 2015. How many goals are there? Anybody know the answer to this one? Because we talk about goals, sustainable development goals, plural. So how many goals are there? Anybody know? Anybody like to guess? No. 100? No. There are 17. So there are 17 sustainable development goals, and these goals are designed to focus on different social issues around the world. And you'll see them presented very, very often like this. So each goal has its own icon, has its own graphic representation. And we can see here, number one there, the goal is no poverty. So the goal by 2030 is to have eliminated poverty from the world. And they go through things like education, quality education, affordable clean energy, responsible consumption and production. They also tackle issues of life below water, life on land, and they also look at then, the partnerships for the goals themselves. So these 17 goals are designed as a roadmap, we said, as a blueprint to take us to a better, brighter, more sustainable future by the year 2030. Again, not far away, not far away. And we've said this, the goals themselves really are interlinked as well. They're not these sort of random individual goals that somebody's just decided that it would be nice to have. They recognize that ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies as well to improve health and education, to reduce inequality, and to boost economic growth, while at the same time doing something about the climate by tackling climate change and also working to preserve oceans and forests. So everything is sort of linked and everything goes together to form this roadmap or this blueprint. And it's very much about, doing things, about taking action for the future. So this is all very nice. This is all very interesting. But why should our students know about the Sustainable Development Goals? That's a very, 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 very good question. I mean, we're English teachers. Well, I was an English teacher for a very long time. You guys are all English teachers. Your job is to teach English. So then why should students know about the Sustainable Development Goals? And why should we be bothering them with the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, I think there are a number of very, 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 very good reasons. So the goals themselves are actually quite a useful instrument that we can use to look at and to examine the most urgent problems around the world. For example, the fact that millions of people don't have enough to eat. There is still inequality between men and women on a number of levels as well. Endangered species, it's very, very common to hear in the news that another species of whatever it is now extinct. Plants and animals are disappearing. And all of these are problems that currently affect the world that we live in. The gap between the people who have and the people who don't have is steadily increasing as well. So the goals themselves are a very, very useful, magnifying glass, perhaps, to sort of to bring into focus these issues. And if we think about it, a very, very large percentage of the population around the world at the moment is aged between 10 and 24 years. And that is if we look at our classes as well, that's quite an important proportion of the students that we teach. So if you teach primary, secondary, high school, or even university, then your students are within this, 40% global population by age. And it's the largest population ever of young people. And that's important. Why? Well, because if anybody is going to solve the problems in the world, it's the next generations. And the next generations need to know what it is that they're up against, what it is that they're facing, what the problems are. So automatically then, a very large percentage of our students are within this sort of 40% of the global population, the largest population of young people ever, the people that in a few years will be in positions of responsibility, in positions of authority, and will be able to address the world's problems. But in order to address the world's problems, they need to know what the problems are. And this is where then an approach to the Sustainable Development Goals in the classroom comes in. And there are a number of good reasons for introducing the Sustainable Development Goals into our teaching or into your teaching, and kind of making them part of conversations that happen in the classroom. I think as an institution, as well, and as a teacher, the fact that you introduce the Sustainable Development Goals into your curriculum, into your teaching, suggests, it shows a more international approach to English language teaching and learning. Remember, the Sustainable Development Goals apply to the whole world, to every single country in the world. And by adopting them, by taking them on board and saying, yes, we're going to do work around the Sustainable Development Goals, I think institutions and teachers are showing themselves as people and professionals with a more international approach to what they do. There is, at a very sort of practical level, there is a lot of information on the goals themselves. There are papers, there are scientific papers, there are lots of things really that we can use with our students, and that in itself can help develop academic skills. I think also there is the moral development. As a company, SMUDP is very, very committed to helping develop global citizens, that is, to helping develop students that not only, have a very, very good command of English, but also have understood and who live by, a certain set of shared morals and values. And that's present in all of our materials. And I think the SDGs adds to that. It is a moral topic. And it's something that we can help our students take on board and accept. I think it's also a very, very motivating subject, because it's something that's very, that everyone can understand. Everybody can understand that, it's important to have clean drinking water. It's important to have quality education. Inequality, it's important to have equality between men and women. It's important to look after land or life on land and life under the oceans as well. And I think, knowledge of the Sustainable Development Goals, an awareness of the global problems as well, I think says a lot about a learner, about a student, and about a person. And arguably, this sort of knowledge and this focus and its understanding can help students when they leave education and then go on. For teachers, well, it's fresh material. It's not the same old Winston Churchill, readings about Winston Churchill, or, at the bank or in the supermarket, or going to New York and having a hot dog. It's completely different. This is fresh material. It's material that typically you don't see in the English language teaching classroom. I think for students and for teachers as well, it shows exactly how relevant English is. If we're going to have meaningful conversations with other countries around the world about the importance of the goals, then those conversations will take place in English, which is still very much the lingua franca. So then the SDGs show exactly how important and how relevant English is. It's moving away just from, you know, ABC, verb to be, 1, 2, 3. So it's not just learning the language, which can be sometimes, it's a bit like another subject. It's a bit like learning chemistry or physics, the formulas, you know, or like learning dates in history. It can be a bit like that. If we're too focused on teaching the language, students can look at it like, you know, as if it were just another subject. The difference there with, you know, history dates and chemistry formulas and what have you is that English is actually something that's designed to be used. It's designed to be as a tool for communication, as a tool for understanding the world around us. So the SDGs then represent a very, very nice injection of fresh material that's not just about learning the language. It's also a very, very good way of bringing the world into the classroom. Again, there's a very, very real danger that the language classroom becomes a bit of a bubble, really. And, you know, we do all the drills, we do all the readings, we do the listenings, and then you know, students leave the class and then it's back to real life because the materials in the course books were, you know, they weren't really that relevant to students' lives. So bringing the SDGs into the classroom is a way of bringing in real world issues and concerns. And again, as we said, it's engaging for learners because it's content that they know about and that they can relate to as well. And then for the school, there's a very, very good reason for adopting and integrating the SDGs into the school curriculum. And that is that it can have a very, very positive influence on the local community. How so? Well, it demonstrates a commitment to global issues. So suddenly this is an institution now that is globally aware and is much more international in its focus, and it's, you know, it's helping students understand about the world around them. So it's not this sort of small local school that's only concerned with what happens 2 or 3 kilometers around the school. No, this is an institution that is committed to understanding global issues and to helping students understand them. And it's also an international focus. There's an international focus to English teaching. It's not just, you know, the course book and the classroom. It's going beyond the classroom and looking at these issues that are international issues, and they're issues that link all of the countries together. And then parents can come to see the institution as a global educator. And I think that adds a lot of value as well to the institution, to be seen as an institution that is concerned with global issues and that is taking steps to raise awareness among children, among its students of these issues. Okay, so far, so good. We understand then what the SDGs are. We understand why we have them. We understand the importance of the SDGs, and we can see the benefits for the students, obviously, but also benefits for teachers, benefits for the institutions. How do we then get started? Well, there are lots of ways of getting started, but I think overall, my advice would be to basically look at what you already have. So look at the course book that you're using, the course material. If you're using a course book, have a look at it. Does it already have SDGs mentioned or highlighted in some way? If it does, then great. You know, that's half the battle. But the chances are that your material or the material that your institution has adopted doesn't have a very explicit focus on the SDGs. But that's not a problem, because what we can do then is to have a look at the scope and sequence, and then try and identify topics that would match with one or more of the SDGs. You know, for example, if there is I don't know, a topic on jobs. Yeah, very often there is a unit on jobs, particularly secondary high school. Okay, there's a unit on jobs, fine. How could we link that to one of the SDGs? Well, for example, we could introduce then the idea of, I bet you're thinking, jobs. You think of jobs, you think of equality, gender equality, yeah? And then we can introduce the SDG that focuses on working towards better equality between men and women, yeah? If we have a unit on the weather, yeah, which is, again, it's very, very common to have a unit or a section of a unit on weather. Well, we can introduce then things like clean drinking water for everybody. Usually in primary, there's the water cycle, the rain and the water cycle. So we can use that as a springboard then to talk about the importance of clean drinking water for everybody and introduce the corresponding SDGs. Yeah. If you can as well, then have a look at your local context. What is there in the local context that you can use to link to one or more of the SDGs? It could be, again, I'm just because it's at the top of my mind, is the idea of clean drinking water. Perhaps not every neighborhood in your community has access to clean drinking water. There are many different contexts. Not everybody does have access to clean drinking water. If we can make that link to a local context, a context that children understand and that children can see, then it becomes much more relevant, much more meaningful. A very, very good way also of introducing the SDGs is through this video, which you can find. It's called The World's Largest Lesson, and you can find it here. Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, I'll be leaving a copy of this presentation, and you'll be able to write to Abigail, and she'll be able to provide, or she'll put a link up somewhere where you can download. So don't worry too much about writing down these references. This is a very, very good way of introducing the SDGs. It's a video that outlines the goals, talks about them, and it's a very, very nice way of starting. So, you could use the video, this one here, The World's Largest Lesson, to start to talk about the SDGs themselves. You could have your students choose one of the goals. And then, for example, design a campaign to raise awareness of the goal in the school and community, as well as, and this is important, practical suggestions of how to meet the goal. And that's very, very important, that there's something that then is designed to take action. Otherwise, there's a danger that this just becomes a bit of an academic discussion. It's very, very important that there's also practical suggestions. And here is sort of a practical suggestion. This is then goal number 12, which is responsible consumption. and production. And this is just an idea then. So to introduce the goal, or to develop the goal, or to raise awareness of the goal, and to sort of consolidate this, then, you know, you could encourage your students to plan an exchange, where they sort of bring old toys in, books, clothing that they no longer want or use, and then they can sort of swap with friends. And then through the activity, the idea is that you know, your students reflect on how we use resources, and you know, the cycle of consumption, and how important it is to give as much use to things as we possibly can, rather than, you know, just using them for a short period of time and then throwing them away and then disposing of them, but giving them new life, giving them to a friend, and then having that friend use them, and then so on and so forth. So that's just an idea, very, very quickly then, that would link very, very nicely to that goal. Here's an example. We talked about these, a unit on communication. For example, you could then use the goal number 2, the no hunger goal, and then students could look at stories about hunger in the news or in media, which is obviously linked to the unit on communication. A unit on water, okay, fine. You can use the clean water and sanitation goal, number 6. I don't know, students could then investigate the history of global droughts, for example, or incidents of waterborne diseases. At the moment, there is a very, very serious problem in Peru over, I think it's dengue at the moment. Again, which is linked to this idea then of clean water and sanitation. If anybody thought that this was, you know, a very, very nice academic idea of these sustainable development goals, these problems are real. Yeah, these problems are real, and they affect every country in some degree or another. So at the moment, then, colleagues in Peru are having a bit of a hard time with incidents of dengue, which is obviously borne by a mosquito, and it's linked to sort of water and sanitation. And then we've got another resource here, which is called Project Everyone. If you get a chance, have a look at this. This will give you, again, lots and lots of ideas, more ideas than I can give you in 45 minutes. So Project Everyone then is just basically this very, very nice resource. There's sort of lots of videos and things. And you can go into this, you can get ideas, get inspiration about how to tackle the goals, how to talk about the goals in your classrooms. Start small would be my advice. You could maybe set up a goal per term to look at. Obviously, you don't need to tackle all 17 goals. Absolutely not. It will be a case of maybe looking at your own context and then focusing on goals that are perhaps close to home. You know, it could be gender equality. It could be, you know, life under the sea. I'm just thinking about, oh, sorry, the oceans. I forget how the goal is formulated. It's number 13, 14, I can't remember now, life under the ocean. So I was lucky enough to work for a day in Viña del Mar and absolutely loved it. And what a fantastic place it is. So schools then on the coast would definitely be looking at that goal, you know, and how they could work towards it, and actions that they could take to conserve and to protect life under the ocean, for example. And then setting up projects. Again, projects around sustainable development goals is a very, very nice way then of using project-based learning methodology, which at the moment is something that's there's a lot of interest in project-based methodology in different countries. But again, very important, concrete, practical actions based on the goals. For example, just to go back to, you know, communities and schools that are on the coast, for example, There could be something like, you know, a morning where the kids with the teachers go out onto the beach and collect up plastic litter, for example, and dispose of it. That sort of thing, you know, but concrete and very practical actions that are based on the goals. There is plenty of material available on the internet to give you ideas as well. There are even lesson plans that you can sort of download, just adjust and basically integrate them. Oxfam has some very, very good advice. Just Google Oxfam and you'll get the site. There's another site called Practical Action. Just Google Practical Action and you'll get the website come up with loads and loads of free resources for teachers. There really is a lot of material available. And why not look at organizations, for example, the British Council, to set up partnerships with? You know, you can approach them and say, hey, you know, we want to work on the 2030 agenda. We want to work with the Sustainable Development Goals. How can you help us do this? And people like the British Council are very, very happy to help usually. However, and this is where I've updated the material, because this is something that's becoming more and more visible, I think is the word. And so we've been talking about all these problems around the world and poverty and people not having anything to eat and people not having access to clean water and sanitation, and then, you know, life under the ocean. And then on the news, we see this and we see that. And what that is producing in a lot of people is having quite a negative effect. And this now actually has a name, and it's called eco or ecophobia. And this was a term that I heard for the first time only a few months ago at a conference in England, and very interested about ecophobia or ecophobia and what it means. And what it basically is this, you know, it's kind of, and I think phobia is a bit of a strong word. It's maybe more like anxiety or depression. So it's this sort of worry that the environment is just collapsing, the world's coming to an end, and we can't do anything about it. It's just too late. And this sort of feeling of helplessness and maybe even guilt about not being able to do anything about environmental decline. And this is something that's becoming more and more visible around the world, you know, ecophobia and this sort of negative effect it's having on people. Phobia is perhaps, again, a bit of a strong word. You could call it perhaps eco-anxiety or eco-depression. And it may be that some of you at some point have even experienced this. You know, you've even thought, oh, you know, what's the point? You know, it's just too late. You know, there's no water. There's, you know, the environment is so polluted now that there's no going back, and that basically the human race is on the verge of extinction. And that's quite depressing. It is quite, and it can produce, you know, quite a lot of anxiety in people. So what we also need to do then is to say, well, okay, yes, we do need to focus on the issues and the problems around the world, but we need to be very, very careful that we're not doing it in such a way that we're going to create students that become anxious and depressed, you know, with all the bad things that are happening in the world. And that is perhaps one of the dangers then, not dangerous, I don't know if dangerous is the right word, but the more aware you become about, the problems around the world, these global issues, problems with the environment, then you can start to feel quite overwhelmed. So again, it's another new term, eco-literacy. So the more eco-literate we become, the more depressed and the more anxious. The more we understand how bad things are, or we think we understand how bad things are, then the more overwhelmed, and this could happen to students. And in fact, some people can even experience PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, due to natural events or natural disasters that they've actually experienced, like flooding, like at the moment, I don't know what it's like in the Southern Hemisphere, but here in Mexico, it is incredibly hot at the moment. And so, we've got all kinds of items on the news about the golpe de calor, and people are dying. Of course, that's what the news focuses on, and what are they calling it? They're calling it, this is due to climate change, and the world's becoming hotter, and this is going to continue, and eventually it's just all going to explode. And this can have, quite a serious psychological effect on people. What does this mean then for us as teachers? Well, the challenge, obviously, is to engage students and to help them understand that work is needed to reverse or to slow down climate change. But we need to do it in such a way that we're not going to overwhelm the students. We need to get students excited. We need to get students engaged. We need to try and encourage this sense of mission, from students, but without overwhelming them, without making them think, oh no, it's all coming to an end, and in 3 years' time, there's not going to be any water, and what's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to my family? It can be quite depressing. So look at your materials critically. It's great that it's the SDGs, great that it's addressing global issues, but how is it doing it? We need to try and avoid overly negative messaging, in classrooms, in our materials. Look at your coursework, check the focus, check the perspective. Is the issue that's being raised, is it tackling it from a more, let's do something about this perspective? Or is it, look how terrible the world is and it's just going to get worse, which perspective is the material taking? And then, try and set up projects that encourage taking action. Kids feel good when they go out onto the beach, they collect up litter, they collect up big sacks of plastic, and they realize that they're contributing to making the world a better place. And that's very positive, and that's very motivating. So it's far better to do that than to sit in the classroom and look at photographs of polluted beaches and complain how terrible the world is and how everything's just going to get even worse. Yeah. And this is also a most excellent resource. Again, British Council. It's about 220 pages. Oops, sorry. So you need a bit of time to have a look at this. But this is material that specifically deals with how to integrate global issues into the language classroom with reference to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It's free. All you need to do is Google this and you can download it. It's a free PDF. You can just download it and then dip into it. I would recommend that you look at the chapter list and then dip into the bits that interest you. This is a fantastic resource. And a final reflection then on why we should be including the Sustainable Development Goals in our teaching. So I'm going to give you a situation, a scenario. I want you to imagine that two people meet on the street. They're waiting for a bus, or they're waiting at a checkout queue in a supermarket. Yeah. Anyway, one of the people is a teacher, an English teacher, and the other person is a member of public, and they just start talking. And member of public then just sort of, to start the conversation, asks the teacher, so what do you do? And the teacher says, I'm a teacher. What do you teach? Teacher says, I teach people. Okay, what do you teach them? I teach them English. English teacher, right? Oh, says the person, you mean grammar, verbs, nouns, pronunciation, conjugation, articles, particles, negative, and interrogatives. Teacher says, well, yes, that too. What do you mean, that too? Well, I also try to teach them how to think and feel, show them inspiration, aspiration, cooperation, participation, consolation, innovation. I help them think about globalization, exploitation, confrontation, incarceration, discrimination, degradation, subjugation, how inequality brings poverty, how intolerance brings violence, how need is denied by greed, how isms become prisons, how thinking and feeling can bring about healing. Huh, I don't know about that. Maybe you should just stick to language. Forget about anguish. You can't change the world. But if I did that, I'd be a cheater, not a teacher. I think that's a very, very nice reflection. And actually, I've taken it from that resource, that British Council resource there that I mentioned. I think it very nicely sums up the role and responsibility of not just an English teacher, but any teacher, I think, in today's world. And on that note, I'd like to end. Thank you very, very much. I make it about 41 minutes or so. So we have a few minutes left if there are any questions. Here are the resources that I refer to as we've been talking. Don't worry about copying them. I will leave a copy of this presentation with Abigail at Learning Corporation, and she'll be able to share, with whoever wants it. And thank you very, very much. Let me see if I can stop sharing. There you go.
All right, so let's give like a couple of minutes to questions. So you have, what questions do you have? I learned that yesterday. Another, it's not there. Any questions? What questions do you have for Andrew on this topic? Any comments?
I know it's quite late, isn't it? So people probably want to get off and have a drink or have something to eat. So no.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew.
There's a question.
Is it? Oh, sorry.
For example, does these goals change in time, or like is there some organization which discuss these goals?
Not entirely sure what you mean. I mean, there are plenty of conversations around the Sustainable Development Goals, and maybe not as much conversation as there should be, and maybe not as many organizations are having conversations. I know that particularly organizations like the British Council are trying to raise awareness and to try, and to integrate it, or integrate the goals in what they do. And obviously at UDP, at University of Dayton Publishing, we also, I don't know whether I can say this or not, I don't know. We've also, can I?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's not a commercial or anything, but we do have material that is specifically designed to help promote conversations around sustainability, around climate action, and things that we can do. I think what I would do is to look around you, is to try and identify organizations in your community that are having these conversations, that are taking action around the Sustainable Development Goals. And if there aren't any, then why not make your school, your institution, then, you know, one of the first institution in your community to actually start, you know, promoting action around the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Any other?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Great.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you to SM Dayton for your participation and being part of this Learning Together conference. We appreciate it. So thank you, Samantha, for your contribution.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very, very much.
Okay. We're gonna say goodbye here. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.